give you an introduction. So welcome everyone. My name is Tristan Claridge and I'm the convener of the webinar series for the new International Social Capital Association. In this session, we welcome Dr. Batia Ben-Hador for a presentation and discussion about the levels of social capital in organizations. Dr. Ben-Hador is a senior lecturer at Ariel University in Israel. Her PhD dissertation was about social capital in organizations, and ever since this has been her main research topic, and she's produced some very interesting publications on social capital. We're going to hear from her tonight about those three levels of social capital in organizations. So over to you.
All right. First of all, I would like to thank you, Tristan, for everything, for this excellent organization, for leading the network. It is an honor for me to present here in the webinar. And Tristan, you are doing a great work. So thank you. And second, I would like to apologize for my English. I know they say that women apologize a lot, but I haven't been speaking English for the last 2 years. And I also have this Israeli accent. So, and I tend to speak very fast. So altogether, that's my not be optimal. So if I'm speaking too fast, so just stop me and say, we don't understand you. And I tried to write everything on the presentation that it will be, that you will understand me better. But if you don't, so please stop me and say, can you repeat it? Okay, so we can talk anytime you'd like, every one of you. So after the thanks and the apologize, I will start with telling about myself. As Tristan said, I started to research social capital during my PhD. And I know I wanted to study social capital in organization, but there was a lot of researchers, and I got confused. What is it exactly? What are the divisions that can be made? For example, there is a very famous division of Napiet and Gauchel that made a distinction between the structural, relational, and cognitive dimension. And the concept of dimension confused me, and the implementation was on intellectual capital and not on social capital. So it was quite confusing for me. And since I'm an organizational behavior researcher, I know that usually in organizations, there are three levels of research. That is the individual level, the small group level, and the big group, or it can be country, it can be all organization, and the big group level. So I was thinking maybe this could simplify the social capital variable for me. And I started to classify studies to the three levels, and actually it worked. I found out that the division was formed quite naturally out of the literature review I did, and it made a lot of sense and order. And of course, some adaptation were needed. I put a lot of thinking about the overlap and how to better separate between them. But it worked, although there is still some overlapping. You can see it, you will see it during my presentation. So what I'm going to talk about today is about the division that I developed and examined. And I'm going to explain each level separately and to demonstrate its use and connection to other organizational and personal variables, as it was found in studies I conducted. All right, so if you don't have any questions, I will start. Okay, so this is a paper of mine from 2017, where I did some review about the three levels, and I explained every level and the connection to performance. So just to be short, what is social capital? Everyone here knows, because you are all social capital researcher. So I took one definition as an intangible asset gained from social relationship, and I'm studying organization. So for me, it's intangible asset in organization. And the three levels of social capital are the personal social capital, which is the individual profits for him or for his or her position in social networks inside and outside the organization. The intra-organizational social capital, which is the middle level, and intra-organizational assets derived from interactions within and between formal and informal groups in the organization, from the level of a work team to the entire organization. And the extra-organizational social capital that is created by the interaction of people within the firm, such as the CEO and the top management team members with external entities that influence the organization, such as competitors, investors, clients, suppliers, and other third parties. So as you can see, it can be a little bit confusing to separate between the levels. So I did research on each level. And I will start with personal social capital, which is the basic levels. This is the individual profit from his or her positioning in social networks inside and outside the organization. Many benefits are derived from having personal social capital, such as the status of the individual, information and knowledge, personal power, finding job and promotion, both within and between the organization. But so far, there hasn't been a questionnaire that is dedicated to measuring personal social capital in organization. Indeed, there are some questionnaires over the years, some personal social capital measuring instruments were developed. You might know some, however, none of them were dedicated to employees, and they didn't fit exactly what I needed, the organizational domain. So my colleagues and I decided to develop such a questionnaire. And the questionnaire we developed and I use it was published in the Social Indicator Research in 2021. And we had a lot of stages of validation. And the questionnaire was developed in 3 stages that provided robust and rigorous evidence for its reliability and validity. What's important is that the questionnaire has 2 different constructs: internal personal social capital and external personal social capital. External personal social capital is the personal social capital that stems from outside of the organization, from personal connection with family, friends, and acquaintances. Internal personal social capital is personal social capital from inside the organization, like a personal connection to co-workers and managers. Both constructs were found to be valid and reliable, and moreover, each construct can be used to measure specific source of personal social capital. So in the study I'm going to demonstrate here, I used only one construct, only the internal personal social capital. And the theme of the study was about employee cynicism. And we ask ourselves, me and my colleague Galit Klein, we ask ourselves, do employee cynicism damage employee performance? And we know that most studies say it does. But we also ask ourselves, what if the employee has a high personal social capital? Still cynicism damage performance? And is there a difference between employees and managers? So 927 Israeli employees, 31 of them held managerial positions from various organizations in Israel, responding to our questionnaire. We measure the personal social capital with the questionnaire we developed, but we use only the construct of the internal personal social capital. And we found that the prevalent concept that cynicism reduced performance was confirmed. Yes, cynicism is not good, it's reduced performance. However, the connection between cynicism and performance among non-managerial employees with high internal personal social capital was found to be positive. That means that even if you are a cynical employee, if you have high personal social capital, your performance will not be harmed, and it might even get better. So we found it very useful to know more about the personal social capital, because personal social capital is sometimes considered to be egocentric. And you can see that even though it's an egocentric construct, it still can help you to improve your performance. So I'm going to the second level, which is intra-organizational social capital, and it's derived from interaction within and between formal and informal groups in the organization, from the level of work team to the entire organization. Intra-organizational social capitals entail the premise of mutual objective, trust, mutuality, respect and appreciation, sharing of information and knowledge, and common norms. The benefits of intra-organizational social capital are both personal and organizational, including turnover and employee absence reduction, employee satisfaction increase, and reinforcement of intellectual capital in the organization. Intra-organizational social capital plays a vital role in the development of more cooperative, productive, and stable relationship within organization, and contribute to the growth and development of employees and organization. Moreover, it creates a competitive advantage for the organization. Unique interaction within the organization produce an asset that it is very difficult to imitate. So if the personal social capital is the most important level for the employee, the intra-organizational social capital is considered to be the most important level for the organization, although there's also the external social capital, and we will talk about it. But in the meantime, I would like to show you an example of a study about intra-organizational social capital. And I think I didn't introduce myself. I come from the Department of Management of Economics and Management. And we'd like to talk a lot about performance, about organizational performance and employee performance. And I asked myself, does intra-organizational social capital affect employee performance? So I studied it with dyads of employees and the manager. So 209 dyads of employees answered the intra-organizational, vigor, and self-efficacy questionnaire. The managers filled in a performance evaluation about the employees' performance. So what I found was that the connection between intra-organizational social capital and employee performance is mediated. I didn't find something that was direct. I did find mediation moderation model. I found that the employee vigor mediates the connection between intra-organizational social capital and employee performance, and self-efficacy moderates it. That means that the more intra-organizational social capital that an employee has, his vigor is getting bigger, he has more vigor, and if he's got a high self-efficacy, his performance will be improved. I badly wanted to find the direct connection. I didn't, but it was very interesting to find out that the combination between personality and situational traits can foster employee performance, because vigor is kind of personality, and self-efficacy is kind of situational, and it can foster employee performance. So this is about the level of intra-organizational level. The third level is the external social capital, which is created by the interaction of people within the firm, such as the CEO and management team members, that have interfaces with external entities such as competitors, investors, clients, suppliers, and other third parties. Links with externals may be beneficial to the organization in a variety of ways, provide access to resources, including funding and personnel, increase trust, provide opportunities, and enhance organization's reputation. Managing external ties also provide a means to buffer the organization from harmful or disruptive external influences. So this is an example about a study of extra-organizational external social capital. The study was about project manager that are workers in boundary spanning roles. So the study explores how they use their intra-organizational social capital and the extra-organizational social capital to promote the ideas within the organization. That's called entrepreneurial activities within the organization. And we gave a questionnaire to 271 project managers. And the result of the study indicate that only external social capital had a direct connection to entrepreneurial activities. Intra-organizational social capital have an indirect connection with entrepreneurial activities when entrepreneurial orientation mediated this connection. So for project manager, extra-organizational social capital is very important for promoting the ideas and the initiation within the organization. So we found that the extra-organizational social capital is especially important for people that are working with entities from outside in the interfaces, although we know inter-organizational social capital is also very, very important for everyone and for project managers as well. And if I compared between the externals, the extra-organizational social capital and the intra-organizational social capital, so I did another research that I tried to compare between the intra-organizational social capital and the intra-organizational and personal, social capital. And we aim to evaluate the impact of these two social capital levels on two dependent variables, employee self-efficacy and success. And we did it in a different method. We did it by trying to analyze emails. We took N1 emails. I don't know if you heard about N1, a very big energy company that suffered from corruption and went bankrupt. It was in 2001. And after N1's bankruptcy, a corpus of email containing data from about 150 users, mostly N1 management, was found. The Federal Energy Regulatory Commission posted it on the web for public use. So we took these emails and started to analyze them. We employed language processes techniques, SQL, to analyze the emails. We also compared between the expressions that were used before and after the crisis. So how did we measure the variables? Personal social capital, we employ words and expressions extracted from personal social capital studies, such as my mate, pal, amigo, friend, fellow, party, the gang, I took part, I volunteer, network, participate. For intra-organizational social capital, we employ words from inter-organizational social capital, such as share objective, commitment, neutral, common, neutrality, etc. For success, we refer mainly to subjective career success. We use words such as excellent, success, drive quality up, significant, good performance, flourishing, accomplishment. And for self-efficacy, we used words and expressions such as I can, I believe in myself, I'm able, I'm capable, I'm confident in myself. And what did we found? We found that personal social capital was found to have a higher impact on self-efficacy and success than intra-organizational social capital. We took the word that we found we actually counted them. And then we made a regular quantitative statistics, and we made quantitative statistics, and we actually compared between the levels. And we found that indeed personal capital had a higher impact. And after the crisis, this gap became larger. As was anticipated, self-efficacy was higher pre-crisis, before the crisis, rather than post-crisis. And the findings confirmed the importance of social capital in organization as a foundation for the self-efficacy and success of individual, as well as supporting the distinction between the social capital levels. The strengthening of the relationship between personal social capital, self-efficacy, and success after crisis suggests that in times of distress, the importance of personal social capital rises, and employees lean on their personal networks. So I know you can say a lot about this paper because it was done in a very unusual method, but it still was very, very interesting because this was emails that were taken out of the personal life. This was an authentic email that people from Enron, most of them were managers. I think that about 90% of the emails were of manager. There was about something like more than 500,000 emails. And it was very, very interesting to analyze them and to look, to search what expression did they use and what did they prefer, and they prefer the personal social capital and not the intra-organizational social capital. I added this information yesterday because Tristan told me that one of the people asked about the gender issue, and I didn't mean to show it, but I'm going to present in the Academy of Management in August a paper that is talking about the differences between men and women. And I started with the known fact that the level of intra-organizational social capital of men at work is higher than that of women due to their structural weakness in creating valuable connection in the organization. So this study was made in 1981, 40 years ago, and I was sure that it's not what they said. I was sure that the level of women's intra-organizational social capital was improved. But since that's what they say, my first hypothesis was that women will have less intra-organizational social capital than men, although I hope that I will not confirm it. And I didn't, so it's good. I also hypothesized that the effect of demographic backgrounds such as education, age and tenures on intra-organizational social capital will be higher for women than for men. This wasn't confirmed also. The two other hypotheses were confirmed. The effect of self-efficacy on intra-organizational social capital will be greater for women than for men. It was. And the effect of organizational citizenship behavior on intra-organizational social capital will be greater for women than for men. I'm sorry that I only now understand that I wrote only the shortcut of the organizational citizenship behavior. So I hope you know you know it, and if not, so it's citizenship behavior. And I collected data from 255 employees of various organizations in Israel. And the participants included 141 women and 114 men. And as I said, only the third and fourth hypotheses were confirmed. And the finding that no differences were found in the amount of the intra-organizational social capital between men and women is encouraging. Indeed, I didn't found that women had more intra-organizational social capital than men, but there were no differences. It's encouraging because it's points to the empowerment of women into organizational social capital since it was 40 years ago. The demographic background, which consists mostly of the participants' human capital, education, had no education, age, had no effect on intra-organizational social capital. The finding may be explained by the fact that personal background contributes mostly to the personal social capital of employees and not to the intra-organizational social capital. And the personality antecedents, self-efficacy, and the organizational antecedents, organizational citizenship behavior were found to be significant only among women, meaning that women need a higher self-efficacy to feel integrated into organizational groups, and they must present a higher organizational citizenship behavior. So this is what I was added. And the last thing I'm going to show is what's next. And what's next, I'm doing with a colleague of mine a longitudinal study based on answers from 300 participants on MTalk. I bet that a lot of you are using MTalk these days. It's easy. Every week, the participants are requested to indicate what is the level of the personal social capital in the organization. They grade the relationship with their superiors and with their co-workers. On the 6 weeks, they are requested to note the average personal social capital for the last 6 weeks. We will then compare the memory to the arithmetic mean of the own score. And we will also check the connection between the relationship with the superiors, co-workers, and the perceived personal social capital and its transformation by time. Another result that we are seeking to find, it hasn't been done yet, we are just planning it now. How did answering the questionnaire for 6 weeks change the perception about the relationship in the organization and the personal social capital? So that's it. I gave you only some of my papers. I have more, but I wanted to give an example about every point. So I know it was on the tip of the toe, but I try to give the big picture. So that's it. And if you have a question, I'll be very, very happy to answer. And if someone would like to make studies with me, I'm open to it. I really would like to cooperate with the international researchers and to research the social capital in organization, because that's what I know. So thank you so much for listening. And questions?
Thank you, Batia. Fantastic presentation and really interesting. We'll have some questions now from the audience. You can either raise your hand within Zoom if you would like, or you can post your comment in the chat, and we'll try and work through in an orderly way to get to your questions. Now, if you don't want to read out or you can't read out your question for any reason yourself, then indicate that in the chat and I'll be happy to read it out on your behalf. But just indicate in the chat so that I know. Batia, I thought I might start with the first question. Quite often people see a similarity between organizational social capital and a concept like organizational culture. Do you think there's much overlap there, or do you think, I'm interested in how you think the social capital concept perhaps has more value than a concept like culture?
I must tell you, Tristan, I never thought about it, and it's a very good question, because I think that organizational culture is the most important thing that you can study and you can understand in organization. It's really, really, really important. And I think that the level of intra-organizational social capital has a direct connection to the organizational culture, because it's team from it. If the organization culture support a good relationship, a mutuality, helping each other, then the organizational intra-organizational social capital will be high. About the personal level, I think it's personal. It's less connected to organizational culture, although there is always effects. Like if the organizational culture is good, I think that you can have more friends, you can have more connections, but I think that the important level is the intra-organizational social capital.
And certainly intra-organizational social capital seems to be almost equivalent to culture. You know, many of the things that you identified in that intra-organizational social capital as you know, belonging and trust, those things seem to be very, very much the same as culture.
Right. But culture is wider. It's bigger. There are more things in culture than only the connection between people. And there is a, you know, all the way that you look at people and think of people and everything that happened, and there are tacit layers so that you cannot see. So I think that you are right. Inter-organizational social capital is an important part of organizational culture, but organizational culture is more extensive. It's wider.
Yeah, right. And the way I often think about it is that social capital helps us to focus in those things that are most productive or beneficial, you know, those things that have a characteristic of capital, which helps us to focus on how important and beneficial they are, helps us to value them more and communicate with other people that they are valuable. Whereas a word like culture, even though it may have a similar kind of meaning or includes similar types of things, of course, it doesn't have that same, suggestion that it's valuable and important.
Yeah, and the word capital also suggests economic outcomes that are not necessarily implied with a culture.
Right. And what I've thought a few times over the years is the organizational culture literature has existed for a very long time, separate to social capital and before social capital. And I've sometimes looked at that literature to see if we can perhaps learn anything in the social capital space from that work that was already done. So it's not really a question, perhaps it's just a suggestion that other social capital researchers may like to do a similar thing and see what they can find in that literature.
I think you are right. It's a great suggestion, and you gave me some idea and thought. So thank you, Tristan.
Well, let's move on to some questions from the chat, and then we'll get to Telly after that. So Buji from Indonesia, did you want to ask your question? Feel free to unmute yourself if you would like. Or I can ask it on your behalf. I'll ask it, and Buji, feel free to unmute yourself if you have a follow-up. So the question is, how about cultural influence? How did you measure or analyze this as well? Or did you, sorry, not how, did you measure or analyze this as well?
What do you mean by cultural influence? Did you mean to the fact that most of my studies were done in Israel? This cultural influence?
Buji, did you want to unmute yourself and clarify that?
Okay, so I'll answer in the meantime. For if you are asking about the countries, so I think that I made a wide range studies that it's supposed to be, every organization is different and every country is different, but Israel is like a common Western country in the meaning of the working everyday life. So I think it's quite similar to every other Western country. If that's what you meant, I'm not sure.
Yes, sorry. I think I just want to clarify a little bit about my question. Actually, what I'm asking was about sometimes in organization, for example, a big organization has quite different culture with a small organization, for example, and also with managerial and non-managerial level, sometimes perhaps a different culture also, because maybe the culture in this sense means how did you measure if as I said before about the big organization, a small organization, the culture is quite different. So yeah, sort of
okay,
like
so
that.
I understand that All right. I understand that you are mostly talking about organizational culture, which is different between organizations. Is this what you meant? Okay.
Yes.
So about the personal level, I just ask people that are working in organization because it's personal, it doesn't matter. But the intra-organizational level is very, very connected to the organizational culture. So I had to do studies in one or maybe some few organizations because they had their own organizational culture, like the paper I presented about the intra-organizational culture that was made in dyads, and there was a performance appraisal of the managers on the workers. It was done in one organization, community centers. There are a lot of community centers, and I had to go to each one of them, but it was made in one organization because of this, because of I wanted to neutralize the effect of the organizational culture, so I made it in one very big organization. Okay?
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, the next question is from Aminal. Aminal, would you like to unmute yourself and ask your questions?
Thank you very much, Tristan and Batia. Thanks for your nice presentation. Actually, organization uses corporate social responsibility, that means CSR. How do you separate CSR and social capital in an organization?
Excuse me, can you repeat the question?
In an organization uses corporate social responsibility, that is CSR. And how do you separate social capital and CSR in an organization?
I'm sorry, the connection is interrupted.
Shall I try, Aminal?
There is quite often echo.
Yeah.
You can see the chat box, question 1, 2, right. 3, and 4. Yes.
I'll read it for you, Aminal. So
yes.
So the first question is, how do you separate social capital and corporate social responsibility in an organization?
It's not the same because corporate social responsibility is something that comes from the corporate. Yeah, it's connected to organizational culture. As we said, everything is connection to organizational culture, but it's something that comes out of the organization, the management, the leaders, and the organizational social capital is something that comes out of the employees themselves, the connection between them. Again, the organizational culture supports it, but it's different. It's not something that the organization is doing. It's something that exists inside the organization, whether you want it or not. So it's different than a responsibility.
Yeah, good explanation.
That's answer your question, Aminul?
Yes.
Is it okay?
Yeah.
And the other one, there were 2 questions.
So Aminul's second question is, what problems or challenges did you face during your study?
Well, so many. First of all, I study organizations. And to study organization, it's difficult because you have to ask permission from organization and to go to the employees, and employees might not want to answer your questionnaires and might not want to cooperate. And there are many challenges in researching an organization because you have to do it on the field and not in the lab like psychologists. So that's why I'm doing now many researches on personal social capital, because personal social capital I can study employees that working in every organization because I'm studying their personal social capital. So it's easier than to study the intra-organizational social capital. I know that's an easy solution, and I'm trying to also to go to organization, but it's difficult. It's difficult and challenging.
Absolutely. And Aminul had a third question about how you measured social capital in your study. And I think he's asking whether or not your questionnaire has been published and whether that's available.
All right. So the 3 levels have 3 measures. The first level that I show, the personal social capital, was published in Social Indicators, and it's questionnaire that is in use, and but it was only recently, about 1.5 years ago, published. During my PhD, I developed a questionnaire of intra-organizational social capital, which was published in Carmeli and the others questionnaire paper. Carmeli was my instructor, and that's why the paper is on his name. It was published in a very, very good journal, and it has only 6 or 7 questions, so it's really easy questionnaire that I use. But the other level, the extra-organizational social capital, there isn't a questionnaire yet. When I measured it, I took some questions from other questionnaire, and that is another assignment that I'm going to do, I hope, next year, and if not the 2 years from now, I will develop an extra organizational questionnaire, because I think that there should be a good questionnaire, not to take some questions from other questionnaires.
Absolutely. And a lot of people often ask about questionnaires. So would it be possible for you to share a link, perhaps after the session, share a link to your previous publications that have those, the personal social capital and intra-organizational?
I'll be happy to do it.
Well, if you could send that to me, then I'll be able to send that on to the people who have registered for this session.
All right.
So the next question is from Telly. Did you want to unmute yourself, Telly?
Yes, thank you, Tristan. Good presentation, Batia. I have a number of questions or observations. I like some clarifications on, please. I noticed you didn't address gender and social class in terms of personal social capital. And to what extent is the family connections can and their ability to be employed in their various positions will contribute to cynicism about how they got to their position. Yes, so there wasn't any gender breakdown in any of your your participant group. So any comment about that?
About gender, you know that most researchers say that there are gender differences in the personal social capital. They said that men had, if you are looking about the Putnam deviation about region region and, can you help me with the word?
Bonding.
Bonding.
Bonding social capital, okay. So they said that men have more region social capital, and therefore they have more personal social capital, because they have more connection, more far-away connection, and they know how to do it. They're going to golf together, and they're staying after work, and women are not so strong with it. But lately, some researches that were done found out that the women are getting closer to the men now, and it's not equal. I found it interesting to look for the intra-organizational social capital, and that's what I did. I have some researches about personal social capital, and still the men has a higher level of personal social capital in organizations. It doesn't make me happy, but I think it's changing. About social class, you are right. I didn't do any research about it. Maybe because in Israel it's not such a hot topic, or for me it wasn't so easy. I don't know, but I wrote it now. because that's a good idea for what I should do next. And you know, I have so many things that I have to do. And about the family connections, I also didn't research it in the sense of social capital. So I have nothing to say about it. So
also, I noticed reading the Enron, the language that was used were very gendered bound, amigos. You know, I could imagine this were very much laddish, what in English, laddish culture. You know, gendered men. This is likely to be the communication between men. Would you agree?
So about Enron, we did another
study. The email communications, yes. I noticed very much gender-bound words that was used to.
So
yes,
I must tell you that we also did another study about gender in Enron, and there were fewer women, but the women that sent the email were in high management team. So we compared between the emails and the success expressions of the people, the success, the trustworthiness, and we found that the women have a higher impact on the share price of the day after it than men's. That means that women had a higher impact. I didn't show it because it wasn't connected to social capital, but it was very interesting to see that although you are saying that the words are gender biased, and still women had a higher impact than the men. Right? I think you froze. Maybe? Oh, it's okay. No, I can see.
No, that's okay. I've got nothing more to say. Thank you.
Thanks, Telly. We'll move on to the next question, which is from Polly Kronos, who asks about your choice of studying cynicism. He asks, what were the reasons for you to use in the questionnaire terms based on cynicism?
Okay, so first of all, you know that social capital is a very positive variable. And I try to also to study some variables that are not considered so positive, such as I also study gossip, which is a very, very interesting variable. And I also studied cynicism. And I was sure that cynicism was not as bad as it is supposed to be by researchers, and I thought that if someone is having a higher social capital, higher personal social capital, it still be okay even if he or she is cynical. And it's really interesting me. I think that's the answer. That it's interesting me to know what's going on with cynical employees. Do they really such bad employees? Is it such a bad trait? And indeed, I found that usually it is. But if you have a high level of social capital, so it's okay. You will do fine.
With that finding, do you have any suspicions or any guesses as to why that happens?
I wrote in the paper, we thought that people with high personal social capital are popular. And if they are popular, they are feeling better. And if they are feeling better, they are doing it, people love them, and they feel better, it doesn't harm their performance. And some people are cynical because of ventilations, some people are cynical because they just, you know, they are doing it in a nice way. So maybe people with high social capital know how to be cynical in a nice way. Maybe it's just a suggestion, I don't really know.
So perhaps there are different types of cynicism, perhaps.
Maybe. You know, there is humor, there is cynicism, and the humor is supposed to be good and cynicism is supposed to be bad. But even in cynicism, maybe it's not as bad as people think it is.
Right. Interesting. And I saw that you brought up personality in a couple of times. And I'm not sure if there's a lot of research that connects social capital with different aspects of personality to see how, for certain individuals, social capital might manifest or be realized in different ways as a result of those different types of personality characteristics. I imagine that's an emerging area of research rather than something there's a lot of research already on.
Yeah, that's because you can measure personality only if you measure personal social capital. Because if you measure the intra-organizational social capital, it won't affect you. And there are not a lot of researchers about the personal social capital because researchers usually tend to look from the organizational point of view and not from the personal point of view in my field, in the organization, not in psychology. Of course, I'm sure that in psychology, there are much more studies about it.
Absolutely. I think it could be an interesting area of research.
Yeah.
So the next question, I'm not sure what your name is, HCS Tech. If you're still here and you've renamed yourself, feel free to unmute yourself. Otherwise, I can ask you a question for you. So there's two questions. The first one is how much the measurements are effective between the three levels of social capital distinctly.
All right, so that's a good question, and I was surprised that nobody asked me this question. What is the difference between personal social capital and extra-organizational social capital, which is also the social capital of individuals, but individuals that are having interfaces with the outside, that are working with the outside. The answer is, of course, that personal social capital, the benefits are for the individual. And in extra-organizational, the benefits are for the organization. However, if a person in a high position that has a lot of extra-organizational social capital leaves the organization, all his connections are going out with him or her. So it still is personal. That is why exactly for this question, I try to develop questionnaires that will specify each level and differentiate between them, because it may overlap in some points, and that's what I'm trying to do, to differentiate between them, because I think that the differentiation is important. It's affect other things. It's affect either the personal or the organizational, or even reputation and or things that are out of the organization.
I think Heidi's just asked a question in the chat that is about exactly that. So I'm not sure you need to expand anymore. Heidi asks, how is it possible to separate the personal from the intra? Social capital is, in the research in Denmark, strongly connected to relations.
That's what I'm trying to do.
Exactly.
That's why I'm developing a different questionnaire, and I think they have different consequences. Really, they are different.
Yeah. And the second question from HCS Tech was, which model did you use to analyze the subject matter?
I didn't hear you.
Which model did you use to analyze the subject matter?
The subject matter? I didn't understand.
I guess the data.
Okay. Which model? You mean which statistics method did I use? Because
Perhaps.
I'm doing all kinds of researches. It's from qualitative to quantitative, and in quantitative, it's different if in the hypothesis and in the I'm sometimes using SAM or R or just SPSS. It's depend on what I'm doing. So I'm not sure I understand the question.
Sure. Well, let's move on to the next one. Oh no. I'm sorry, we can't hear you, Fendoa. I think your microphone may not be working. No, I can't hear you still. Might be something wrong. Should we move on to the next question? Do you want to try posting your question in the chat, or see if you can get your microphone working, and we'll come back to you. The next question, Gulzar has his hand up, but we'll get to Marion first because she posted in the chat. Marion, would you like to unmute yourself, ask your question?
That's great. Very interesting discussion going on. I was just wondering something that how the interrelationship between this personal capital and intra-organizational and the outside organizations. Perhaps part of the question has already been asked and discussed. So I need to know that can we accumulate all these three components or not? Number one. Number two is that when you see, for example, if you measure today, perhaps give me the example of Word.com or Enron. Before their audits, they were doing well and they had very good social capital and everything was going fine and people were very happy. But after their audit, everything was crumbled down and perhaps everybody in the organization might have been looking at each other with quite suspicions and doubts. And even outside people were also highly suspicious and government put a lot of ban on them. So how will you see, organization today has high capital, social capital, and maybe when you make its real objective audit, and then it may have different aspect of the different phase, for example. So sometimes this confusion also creates the idea of social capital. So whether we should see the outside social capital after its proper audit and objective audit like that. So something like that. I was just thinking, and I can't understand, but I have conveyed my question or not. But if you understand something, just let me know, please.
All right. So about your first question, you asked about the first and the third level, didn't you? If I understand you correctly, yeah. And the differentiation between them. That's
no. Yeah, yes, my question is that whether they are three components are totally independent from each other, or we can combine them together to measure social capital.
All right.
Not
so
at all.
I think that's very important question, but also a little bit complicated. Many researchers are combining and they are saying just the word social capital, organizational social capital. And then when they say organizational social capital, you see that sometimes they are referring to the personal, the social capital of the employees, and sometimes they are referring to the organizational social capital. And it's very confusion. So I think it's maybe conceiving, maybe very confusing to use all the three levels together. And if you paid attention when I talked about personal social capital, I also differentiated between the connections that are coming from outside with friends and family, and connections that coming from inside, like friends within the organization, because this is also important to understand that they have a different impact. So I think that the differentiation is useful and needed. That's about the third thing. The first thing about Enron, first of all, there can be a lot of criticism about this study, and it was published. But there can be a lot of criticism because it's based on real emails and that people wrote, and I have no control about it. And you said that Enron had a good social capital before the crisis. So I'm not sure it's true, because it was a very corrupted company, and I'm not sure that the relationship was so good inside of them. In fact, I know that, for example, one, I think the CFO, Sharon Watkins, had complained about the management, about corruption before the crisis. So I know that there weren't such a good relationship inside, and that's why I found that the personal social capital was much more important and had a bigger impact in Enron, because they didn't work together well. The intra-organizational social capital wasn't good, but they did have the personal social capital because they were human beings inside of an organization. I hope that's answer your question.
Very good, very good. Okay, so may I have small another answer, other question, please. It is that can we measure social capital of a community or society as well?
Yeah,
we measure for the organization, but if for example, if I'm interested to measure the social capital of my city, for example, of my country, so how do you think? What do you suggest? Is it possible?
So researchers do research social capital of cities and also of countries. The World Bank is measuring countries' social capital, but I will, in organizations, I will refer it as intra-organizational social capital, what you will refer as community social capital. And someone that Tristan sent me some question ahead, so someone asked about school, and I must say that in schools it's the same. It's exactly the same. It can have the social capital, intra-social capital inside the school of teachers and the relationship between them, and the external of the school and the relationship with other school, with parents, and I don't know, with everyone in the outside. And there is the personal social capital of everyone.
Great, thank you very much indeed. Nice.
Okay, let's move on to the next question. Marion, would you like to ask yours?
Sorry, I didn't.
Yeah. Gosh, I've been busy in the background talking to people on the chat, sorry. Thank you very much, presentation, etc. My interest, I'm also very interested in organizational behavior and teach leadership, and predominantly. So, but when you're actually talking about the cynical individual, that sort of person always fascinates me. And in the leadership literature, we actually sort of have, there's sort of a lot of, not that much research being done. It's been a little bit ignored about substitutes for leadership in organizations, etc. It has to do with job design and those sorts of things. But what you said sort of jogged in me the thought that perhaps cynical individuals with high social capital becomes another substitute for leadership. They don't look necessarily for strong leadership in the organization. They actually get a lot of their, empowerment in the organization from their social capital role. Would that be a fair observation, do you think?
Yeah, first of all, many researchers said that if you want to get promoted, like there is a study about nurses, and it shows that it's not that the best nurses that were promoted, but it's the nurses with a higher social capital. It's not what you know, it's who you know. And people that are getting to be managers have not always, but in a lot of times they have a high personal social capital. They have good interpersonal connection. But I think what differentiates between leader and manager, because manager can have a good personal social capital, a leader should know how to make this into organizational social capital works. He should unite the people. He or she, of course, should unite the people, should make them work together, should strengthen them into organizational social capital. And I think that's what differentiates between a leader and manager, which sometimes the differentiation is not so clear, and it's a little bit it's complicated, like everything in our field. But I think you are right. That's an important part of the leader role, to make sure that the intra-organizational social capital will work. That's what I think.
Yeah, that's great. Now we're going to have an organisational group in the new association that's being launched. So hopefully we'll get to talk further on all of this in the future. Thank you.
Yeah, that's interesting.
And certainly as network theorists tend to talk about, quite often the most influential person in a network isn't necessarily the person with the highest position or role. Yeah. It isn't necessarily the leader who has the most influence.
Right.
And I think that's an interesting thing. I certainly observed this when I was teaching years ago, and we were doing research in a teaching environment. Quite often the most influential student in the class wasn't necessarily the person who was loudest. And it wasn't necessarily the teacher who was the most influential person in the room. Sometimes a student was. So right. I think it gets to these ideas.
Yeah, I think you are right. And I think that's the difference between personal social capital and intra-organizational social capital.
Absolutely. So a couple of questions that were submitted in advance from people who couldn't attend live. Mario from South Africa asks, how do organizations use the social capital that their employees have? How is it measured and hence valued? And what convinces organizations to support networks of relationships and to use them in implementing strategies?
So I'm not sure that organizations are doing something for the social capital. It's usually either you have it or you're not, and it's depend in the organizational culture. About the measuring, I think I answered it, but about how to convince the organizations, I think that studies that show that social capital have an impact on performance is very convincing for organization, because organization really like to support the performance either of the employees and the organization as a whole. And by the way, I must confess that I didn't do anything to measure the organizational performance, because it's a little bit complicated. It should be connected to the other level, the level of the external social capital, and I think that it's usually has an impact on reputation or investment of money, but the performance of the organization, it's a little bit difficult for me, so I prefer to measure employee performance. And there is a connection between intra-organizational social capital and employee performance. Even if it's not direct, there still is a connection. And this, I think, what might convince the organization to support the social capital.
Yeah, I think so. And I think it's something that I hear consistently from people, the challenge of communicating the importance of social capital to organizations who are so used to valuing other things, other measures of performance, and the social side sometimes, or quite often, almost always even, is overlooked. So I think it's a challenge we all have.
Yeah.
So another question from submitted prior was from Michael in the United States, who asks what would be your 3 suggestions for companies that should address based on your work?
First of all, I'm doing theoretical studies. I'm not sure that organization will be so willing to invest in people. I know it's in challenge, but I think for the three levels that can be a conclusion. About the personal level, of course, organizations should hire or search for people with good relationship. However, there is a little bit. It's a little bit dangerous, people with external personal social capital, because they can easily leave the organization and not support the organization so much. So one conclusion is that the most important level is the intra-organizational social capital, the organization should invest in creating a good atmosphere, good relationship between people. And I know that it's kind of buzzword, so that's it's obvious, but still organization doesn't do it. And again, about the third level, the external level, it's very important in the interfaces. There should be people with good relationship. We all know about it, but sometimes organizations forget about it. They are just looking for the performance and for the money, and they forgot that you have to invest with good relationships with entities from the outside, with clients, with suppliers. It's so important because that's what leads to a good performance. I know it's not exactly 3 conclusions, but that's what I thought now.
Yeah, absolutely. And there was a couple of other questions submitted in advance, but I believe you've already answered those, including the one
and the gender. Yeah.
So if you have a little bit more time, I have a couple more questions.
All right.
I was interested in the external social capital and whether or not you differentiate between the types of relationships that are perhaps institutionalized or formalized in some kind of way compared to relationships that are just simply personal relationships. And what I mean by those formalized relationships is those relationships with, say, a person in another organization that everybody knows within the organization. That's who you go and talk to. If you want printing done, you go and talk to John at this organization. And so it extends a little bit beyond just interpersonal relationships between one person in the first organization and one person in the second organization. They're sort of, you know what I mean, formalized or institutionalized in some kind of way.
So what you are doing now is very interesting because you took the third level and you connected it to the first level, to the personal. You said, okay, you have an external social capital, but if you want to have a good connection, go to the people with the best connection, with a higher personal social capital in the other place. And so you are so right, but now it depends whether this other person is just a very friendly human being that everyone is his friend, so it's his personal social capital, or he would like to take this personal social capital and do with it something for the benefit of his or her organization. So that's how it became the external social capital. And this is what, when I said there is some overlapping and some problems in differentiation between the levels, that is exactly one problem. And you are so right. And I think that when I'm going to develop the third level questionnaire, I'm going to consider this point that you just raised and to think about it, how can it be solved?
Yeah, because it seems like a complicated issue because these relationships almost always involve people, and they're almost always formalized to some extent. And so it seems like quite a challenge to try to separate those issues.
It is a challenge, and I think that always will be a little bit overlapping, but I think that if you understand what you mean behind what you're doing, so this will help you to differentiate between them.
Yeah, absolutely. My second question is about your research on change, because there isn't very much longitudinal research on social capital, and a lot of the research tends to just look at a very narrow snapshot of time. But we know that social capital can be quite highly dynamic and it can change quite rapidly as a result of various things. So my first question is about whether or not the act of measuring social capital actually changes it, so that the next time you measure it, part of the reason why it might be different is because you've already measured it previously.
Yeah, that's something I'm going to do in the next. We didn't do it yet. We are going to measure in 6 weeks, and in the last week to ask whether the answering for this questionnaire had changed your relationship. And I must tell you that we made a pilot. We had a pilot. It has a lot of problems, but we had an answer on this question. Many people say it did. It did because we also asked them to write some sentences about how do they feel, and people do write, and they say, yes, it did. I look different at my relationship now. And there are some people who say, no, it didn't make any change. But I think it does has an impact. We have some problem about how to make it more quantitative, how to measure it, and we are still working on it. That's why we didn't do it yet. We are working on technical problem to solve it.
Right, and perhaps it'll have the most impact the first time it's measured, whereas each subsequent time it's measured, it may not have as much impact on the social capital that exists. And certainly what I see with my work in organizations, when I measure social capital and you're asking people about the importance, say, of these social factors and processes, they immediately become more aware of those importances. Right. And so they start to value their relationships more. They start to invest more in their relationships, just even subconsciously, because you went and asked them about it. But the second time you ask it, of course, they've already had that realization or realignment of values. So maybe it doesn't have as much effect the second time.
I didn't measure the difference between the first and the second time, and maybe I should think about it, but I'm think so much like you about the first time, because in my first study that I did in my PhD, exactly the same phenomenon happened. I went to one organization and I started to give people questionnaire about their social capital. And then after the measuring, people started to go to the HR manager and ask questions and said, how did we went? And do we have good relationship? It became such a competition between the units who has the higher social capital. That's something I didn't mean at all to do. I didn't mean to publish it and to say which unit has the higher social capital, but the people ask, well, how did we do? Do we have a good relationship? And then I started to understand that if you are asking people about it, they started to think about it, and it started to be important for them.
Absolutely. And so this is really a tool for anyone who's working with organizations. Yeah. Potentially you can build social capital simply by asking people about it. Right. But on that as well, what I've noticed as well through my work is sometimes if the social capital is very poor, very negative, particularly if there are negative views or distrust, then sometimes asking people about those things actually reinforces those negative aspects of their views. Like that, I didn't realize it was such a distrustful workplace until you asked me about it, and I thought about it, and then I realized I really can't trust anybody. So maybe we need to be careful also about reinforcing those negative views.
It's gain or risk. It's risky a little bit, and you are right. I also got in my PhD in the community centers. I also got some negative reaction, and there were people that refuses. There were whole units that refuses to answer the questionnaires, and I knew that there's a problem, but there was nothing I can do about it because they refused to answer.
Right. I'm really fascinated by your longitudinal study. I was also wondering if any of you're looking for any key events that might be occurring during the study period that might have an impact on social capital, just those events that might occur.
We didn't think about it. I will write it down.
I mean, very, very hard to know what to look for because, you know, it could be anything. So it's hard to know what to look for, but, you know, some key events might have big impact.
Every week I'm asking how are your relationship with your superior, how are your relationship with your co-workers, how do you feel in the organization, appreciated, valuable, and so on and so on. But I didn't think about key events that can be interested, but we do give them a space to write down qualitatively the opinions, what they think. Maybe we can ask them about if there was a key event. That's a good suggestion.
Right.
You still have an impact on the study that is going to take place.
Well, in fact, I have one more question about the longitudinal study, which is about the nature of leadership. Because what we see quite often in social capital change is that just a single individual and the choices that they make in the way in which they lead a social grouping can really shape the direction in which social capital changes in very significant ways. So this might be outside the scope, or maybe you're already looking at that, whether or not the type of leadership or the style of leadership that's involved might influence the change.
We are not looking for it because it's too much, but I think that's a really that's something that I was meant to do in the next few years to learn, to find out more about the connection between leadership and social capital. It's because there are some few studies about it, and as I said, what they know so far is that people become managers because they have a high personal social capital. But how do you use this social capital? How do you make the personal into organizational? That's a question. That's a difficult question. I don't know how to study it yet. If you have ideas, you, Tristan, or everyone else from the networks, I'll be happy to hear. I'll be happy to cooperate in such a study because it should be really, really interesting. But I should find how to do it exactly, how to measure it.
Yeah, exactly. And I think I share your problem that I have so many ideas and so many things I want to investigate. And social capital is just such an exciting area to be researching right now. There's so much to do.
I agree.
So there's another question in the chat from Stefan, who's asking about, along these same sort of lines as to emerging areas of research, if you have any recommendations for future research on gender in intra-social capital.
On gender, on interest, there are so many possibilities to, sometimes we are laughing and saying that to research gender is the most simple things, because every time you just have to add a demographic question and ask if your gender for your gender, and then to do the comparison between men and women, and you always get something fascinating. So I think that, for example, I did a research about gossip, and gossip is sometimes considered as part of social capital, because it's connect between people. And I was expecting to find that women are gossiping more than men, and it wasn't. I didn't find it. I found that they are gossiping on different things, on different interest areas. Women were gossiping about appearance and about men, but if women had something good to say about men appearance, they had to add something not so good about his character. Men on the other side was gossiping about achievements. They are much more competitive, and they did gossip about women, but it wasn't as I don't know, as deep. I don't know how to say exactly as deep as the women gossip. But about the amount of gossiping, they are gossiping the same. Men gossiping exactly the same amount as women. It's just on different subjects. So that was very interesting. So about your question, I think that every subject that you will choose will be so interesting to see the differences and what you can find, because the findings are not something that you expect to find. Like I didn't expect to find it in the gossiping study.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're coming towards the end now. Does anybody have any final questions you would like to ask? Feel free to unmute yourself if you have one.
Just I want to share that maybe it's possible, if it is easily possible, can you share the measures, the tools that you, if it's openly accessible and can be shared?
I will send it to Tristan. Is it okay? Okay,
yeah. Please.
I'll include it in the email. I will include the links that Batia sends to me.
All right.
Thank you.
So any final questions? No? Well, thanks very much for your time, Batia. It's been a really fascinating presentation and an even more fascinating discussion with lots of fantastic ideas that we want to follow up on more, I'm sure.
You also gave me some great ideas. I wrote them down, and I hope I can study all of them in the next few years. And thank you for all of you for your excellent questions and for listening to me. And it was a pleasure. And thank you, Tristan, for organizing and doing it so gracefully. And so thank you so much. And have a great weekend.
Thanks, Batia.
Thank you.
So our next event is going to be a question and answer session in 1 week from now. So that's on May the 20th. You can register on the website if you would like to attend. And our next webinar is actually going to be by me. I'm going to be talking about the limits to social capital. So exploring why social capital can't be continually improved, why there is a maximum level of social capital perhaps that may exist. So that'll be on May the 27th. And you can also register for that on the website as well. So we'll end there. Look forward to seeing you all again next time.